If you're thinking about a move to Hawaii or even a move within Hawaii, you're probably asking, should we buy a home or should we rent? Now, this is a major decision that impacts almost everything. It impacts your finances. It will impact, of course, the location where you live. It'll impact your lifestyle. It'll impact your long-term plans. And if you have keiki, the schools where your kids are going to be attending, it just affects a whole host of things. So in this video, we're going to explore the pros and cons of buying versus renting on Oahu and in Hawaii for that matter, so you can make an informed choice. Aloha, my name is Chris Shomo. I'm a real estate agent and owner and founder of Home Sweet Home Hawaii Real Estate, brokered by eXp Realty. Welcome to our channel. Oahu's real estate market is very unique, and if you're watching this, you probably know this already. And we are literally a set of islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. We have limited land, and homes, they tend to stay in high demand. We deal with a low inventory, and that usually tends to stay a seller's market, meaning the sellers have the upper hand. Now, before getting into the pros and cons, something that comes up all the time is when someone is planning to live in Hawaii for a limited time. Usually this conversation is with military families. They're PCSing to Hawaii, or maybe they're already here and they have an exception for about how long they're going to be here. Now, the general rule of thumb is 3 years, more or less. And if you plan to be here for 3 years or longer, then it's usually worth buying a home. Now, if you have a year left before you're transferred somewhere else and you want to buy a home, then you'd want to plan to keep the home after you leave and rent it out until you hit that 3-year mark. Of course, 3 years is approximate, but run the numbers on the home you're interested in, along with the help of your lender and your real estate agent. Now, the lender can give you a pretty clear picture of any upfront costs and the breakdown of the payments over the next several years. Your realtor can help you understand the historical appreciation in the area and also any upcoming changes or construction, for example, that could impact the value of the home for better or for worse. The 3-year general rule of thumb factors in the appreciation of your home value with taking into account all your closing costs and brokerage fees if you plan to sell when you leave for your next duty station in 3 years. And that is if, and only if, you don't plan to keep the home long-term as an investment property as an appreciating asset. So what I mean by that is, if you do plan to keep the home long-term as an appreciating asset, then it's okay to buy now if you know you're just gonna be on island for a year or two, just as long as you plan on holding it for a few years down the road. Okay, so let's talk about some pros and cons of buying, and then some pros and cons of renting. So the pros of buying a home: building equity. Purchasing a home allows you to build equity over time. So as you're paying down your mortgage, you increase your ownership stake in the property. And because Oahu's home values have a history of rising on average of 4% year over year over year for decades, the home is usually appreciating. So if or when you sell, you typically get back the equity you built plus the value from the home's appreciation. Now, there are some areas that increase significantly faster than others and vice versa. So that 4% has been an average over the past 40 years, and it includes not just single family homes, but also condominiums as well. That could, for better or worse, bring down that average. So if this is important to you, and it's usually important to most people, you'll want to learn about which areas tend to bring in the highest appreciation. Believe it or not, there are some pockets and neighborhoods like mine that have increased 25 to 30% just over the past 4 years. Now let's talk about stability. Homeownership brings better stability. Now, here you have a permanent residence and you don't have to worry about rental agreements or rent increases or getting kicked out if the owner decides to sell the home. There are also tax benefits to the homeowners. Now, homeowners, they're usually eligible for big breaks in tax deductions on mortgage interest and property taxes. And of course, that can be very helpful when April rolls around and you're filing your taxes. Now, there's customization, and what I mean by that is if you own the home, you can make your home yours. You can hang stuff on the walls, you can build improvements, you don't have to worry about getting approval from the owner, and so you can renovate renovate as much as you like. Now there are caveats though, so if you buy a home in an HOA, there will certainly be some requirements and limits on what you can and can't do to the home. So I'm sorry if you wanted to paint your house in your favorite sports team's colors if you're living in an HOA, that just ain't gonna happen. Okay, so let's get into some cons of buying a home. Of course, the main con is high upfront costs. So most of the time, this is the reason that someone decides not to buy. When you're buying a home, depending on the loan you use, you may be required to make a substantial down payment. And that's typically 20% if you want to avoid private mortgage insurance. And if you want to get into that, that's a whole nother video on itself. Feel free to reach out to me, or I can recommend some lenders you can speak with. Then you also have your closing costs and some other fees like inspection costs. Now, I don't suggest you just guess on what this number is. You really need to have a conversation with your loan officer to start with, and then get an idea of whether buying is feasible or not. Loan officers help people to figure out the answer to this question on a regular basis. Some people are able to buy a home without a down payment. There are so many loan programs out there, and it's truly an art. We work with many lenders who usually know who's offering the best rates for the types of loans. And if you need a recommendation for a lender, like I mentioned, feel free to ask. We refer people all the time to lenders. There's no benefit to me to do that, but that can be very helpful and save you a lot of time and a lot of money. Now, going back to the cons of buying a home, the next con is the maintenance responsibilities, or what I like to call adulting. Now, seriously, homeowners are responsible for this. They're responsible for the maintenance and the repairs, and it can be both really time consuming and costly. If you live in an HOA, there are usually certain things that are covered by the HOA, but still the bulk of the costs, they're gonna fall on the homeowner. Now, another big con, and we really don't see this much in Hawaii at all, but it's the market volatility. And real estate markets, they can fluctuate, and there's no guarantee that your home's value will appreciate over time. But that said, Oahu especially tends to be the exception on this con based on the decades of rising appreciation. The Hawaii real estate market tends to be less impacted by the US economy. So when the 2008 crash happened, yes, Hawaii was impacted as well, but it didn't dip as low as it did or take as long to recover compared to the rest of the US. Now, this is partly due to the limited land and low inventory, having a lot of international buyers, and the impact on tourism from international visitors. So there are some pros and cons of buying. Now let's get into some pros and cons of renting. Now, the first pro of renting is flexibility. Renting definitely gives you more flexibility, and you can just up and move quickly without dealing with selling a home. You're also going to have lower upfront costs, of course. Renting typically requires a security deposit and a first month's rent, and if you have pets, and even if the rental place accepts pets, then you'll have an additional pet deposit. And that total is significantly less money than upfront costs when buying a home, unless of course if you're military, taking advantage of your zero down VA entitlement. And if you're renting, you have no maintenance costs. Landlords, they're the ones generally responsible for maintenance and repairs. So over time, you don't have to deal with surprise costs from like a fridge breaking down, or a washer dryer needing to be replaced, or needing to service the AC. And of course, the major expenses like replacing the roof or what have you. Okay, now let's quickly get into some of the cons of renting. So obviously, at number one, there's no equity building. So when you're renting, you are paying the owner's mortgage. So they're happy because you're helping them build their wealth and getting closer to their retirement goals. But that monthly rent payment is money that you will never see again, because it is, of course, it's not going to contribute to ownership or equity, at least your ownership or equity. Now, a rent to own situation can be the exception to that. And that can be a nice arrangement, but it's not common at all. And it's not often that a homeowner is willing to do that for you. Now, another problem we see for renters, of course, are rent increases. And nobody likes that one at all. So typically you'll be locked into a year lease, and then after that lease it goes month to month, or you could lock into a longer lease, 2 or 3 years. But what we see usually is a 1-year lease, and then when that lease expires, it's time to renew the lease. The landlord or the owner has the right to increase that rent. And that's what we'll see. Another con for renting is customization, which we talked about briefly. And yes, of course, you can't customize a house that isn't yours. Sometimes, or I should say oftentimes, a landlord will allow you to repaint the interior of the home that you're renting to your liking. But prior to you moving out, you'll be requested to paint it back to the neutral colors or whatever condition the home was in before you rent it. But the biggest con of renting, of course, is the financial cost, or shall I say financial loss, when it comes to renting. So if you think about it, if your rent is $4 grand a month, which is typical for a single family home here, you're paying $4,000 a month, that's $48,000 a year. Now that is $144,000 over the course of 3 years. And if you're renting for 4 years, that's $192,000. $192,000 that you're never going to see again. That's actually happening to someone we know, and it's really common with military families because they're just too concerned or too afraid of any potential risks. And it also has a lot to do with the price sticker shock, right? Because if you're moving from Texas, where you can have a single family home on 3 acres that might cost like 400 grand, but then when you move here, for 1/5 the size of the house and the lot size, you're paying $1 million. But ultimately, you've got to look at it as a business investment. So they are literally losing almost $200,000 into their landlord's pockets in the 4 years that they're going to be living here. Otherwise, they'd be walking away clearing a nest egg of like 120 grand. And that's after all the closing costs and brokerage commissions. So yeah, that would definitely be the greatest con for renting. So if the costs work for you, then the decision comes down to your lifestyle and future plans. If you're here 3 years or more, or holding onto the home as an investment property long-term, then buying is usually the way to go. But if your stay is short, or if you need flexibility, then renting is probably better, unless you plan, of course, on holding your home for longer-term investment as the equity increases over time. That's all for today. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, do us a favor of subscribing to our channel and hitting the like button to improve our channel, and also tap the notification bell. That way you can be notified when we roll out our next video. Now, if you have any questions, or if you want to walk and talk through the process for your specific situation, whether buying or renting is right for you, feel free to reach out to me. My contact info is below, and you can text or email, or just calling is fine. And whether you're planning to move in 9 days or 9 months from now, we love it when people reach out. Our goal here at Home Sweet Home Hawaii is to make your move as smooth and successful as possible. Mahalo for watching, and until the next video, aloha.